In the heart of Manhattan, a discreet young woman finds herself facing a secret capable of shaking giants. Amidst memories of her grandmother, difficult choices, and an uncertain future, she discovers that courage might be the only key to turning truth into hope. The chilled air conditioning on the 42nd floor of the Meridian Trust Bank contrasted with the suffocating July heat that battered Manhattan. Hannah Clark adjusted the thin scarf she always wore, even in summer. It was a gift from her grandmother, the last she received before she passed away. A touch of color amid the sea of gray and black suits dominating the executive floor. Miss Clark, the investment committee meeting has been moved up to 2 p.m. I need the updated folders by then, said James Connors, the chief financial officer, not taking his eyes off his phone as he walked by her desk. Yes, sir. They will be ready, replied Hannah, already organizing the documents. At 24, Hannah had been an executive secretary at Meridian for only 8 months, one of the most powerful investment banks on Wall Street. For many, it was just an entry-level job, a step on the corporate ladder. For her, it represented much more. It was a fulfillment of a silent promise made to her grandmother, Margaret, who always said in her letters, "You are the keeper of details, Hannah, and one day, that will make a difference." Hannah had grown up in Queens, the only daughter of a nurse who worked double shifts. From a young age, she learned to be self-sufficient, to observe before speaking, to notice patterns and inconsistencies. Her grandmother, with whom she spent weekends, cultivated in her this gift of observation. "See that gentleman on the park bench?" Margaret would ask. "Notice how he folds the newspaper always on the same page. There's a story there." The small apartment Hannah shared with her mother now seemed distant. Every morning, she crossed the bridge to Manhattan, blending into the crowd of professionals, feeling both a part of and a stranger to that world. Her salary paid the bills and still allowed her to save a little, perhaps enough to one day help her mother reduce her workload. At Meridian, Hannah was practically invisible, perfect in her role, discreet in her presence. She served coffee in meetings, organized schedules, transcribed minutes. She listened without being noticed. She saw without being seen. In the copy room, Hannah was organizing the documents for the meeting when she noticed a solitary page in the printer's output tray. It was an internal memo marked draft, confidential. Normally, she would place it in the pile of documents for destruction, but something caught her attention. The header mentioned the Municipal Public Employees Pension Fund, the same way her mother had been depositing her savings for 25 years. Hannah hesitated, looking around to make sure she was alone. She picked up the document and read it quickly. Technical terms filled the page, but some phrases stood out: reclassification of risk assets, temporary transfer of funds, and accounting adjustment for quarterly targets. She wasn't a finance expert, but something that didn't sound right. She put the document in her folder, determined to examine it further later. That night, in her small apartment, Hannah spread the memorandum out on the kitchen table. Beside it, she placed newspaper clippings about the bank and public reports she had downloaded from the internet. Things started to make sense, and what she saw made her feel cold. The numbers in the memorandum indicated that Meridian was diverting pension fund resources into high-risk investments, masking the operation with complex financial engineering. Hannah took a deep breath, thinking about the thousands of people, teachers, police officers, nurses like her mother, who depended on that money for their retirement. People who had worked their whole lives believing their future was secure. She opened the drawer of the desk and took out a worn wooden box. Inside, there were dozens of letters from her grandmother, written on light blue stationery, with delicate yet firm handwriting. She picked one at random, as she always did in moments of doubt. "Dear Hannah, remember that honesty is rarely the easiest path, but it's always the one that allows us to sleep peacefully at night. Never let fear of what's to come stop you from doing what's right now." The next morning, Hannah arrived at the bank earlier than usual. Her heart was racing as she waited in the anteroom of the compliance director, Edward Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to disturb you so early, but I found something that I think you should see," said Hannah, handing over the memorandum along with her notes. Thompson leafed through the documents in silence, his face impassive. Where did you get this? It was left on the printer. I noticed something odd about the numbers and... Thompson interrupted her. Miss Clark, I understand your concern, but I believe there has been a misunderstanding. These are standard Treasury procedures, too technical to explain now. I appreciate your diligence, but this is not within your scope. But so, the pension funds are being. That's all, Miss Clark. I suggest you return to your duties. The cold gaze of Thompson sent a shiver down Hannah's spine. He showed no surprise, only irritation, as if he already knew. Throughout the day, Hannah noticed furtive glances directed at her. Her phone rang less. Executives who usually asked her for favors now avoided her desk. In the afternoon, she received a message requesting her presence in the Human Resources Department. The meeting room was silent when Hannah entered. A middle-aged woman with a rehearsed smile greeted her. Next to her, James Connors kept his eyes fixed on a file. Miss Clark, I regret to inform you that your position has been affected by a departmental restructuring. Today will be your last day at Meridian Trust. The words fell like a hammer. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. But, I don't understand. My performance review was excellent last month. It's not about performance, but structural reorganization, the woman explained, sliding an envelope across the table. Here is your severance agreement. It includes an additional month's salary, provided you sign the confidentiality clause. Connor's gaze finally met hers, cold, calculating. Hannah then understood. It wasn't restructuring. It was retaliation. An hour later, Hannah exited through the revolving door of the imposing Meridian building, carrying a cardboard box with her belongings. Among photos, pens, and a small potted plant, there was also a copy of the memo she had inadvertently taken with her. Security hadn't even bothered to check the contents of the box. In the crowded subway, clutching the box, Hannah felt warm tears silently stream down her face. Not for the lost job, but for the injustice she had witnessed and the helplessness she felt. The following weeks were hard. Hannah avoided telling her mother about the dismissal, saying only that she had taken a leave to study. In job interviews, the question was always the same. Why did you leave Meridian after such a short time? The truth would condemn her. The lie corroded her soul. The savings were dwindling quickly. Rent was due in 2 weeks. In the fridge, only leftovers and an expired yogurt pot. On sleepless nights, Hannah reread her grandmother's letters, seeking strength. One morning, while leafing through the newspaper in search of job openings, a small note caught her attention. Law firm seeks evidence of irregularities in the financial market. Below was the name of a lawyer, Daniel Harris. The office of Harris & Associates occupied half a floor in a modest building downtown. Nothing compared to the mirror towers of the financial district. The receptionist, a gray-haired lady, smiled warmly when Hannah explained that she didn't have an appointment. Mr. Harris is with a client now, day. But if you can wait, he always reserves an hour for unscheduled appointments. Hannah nodded, sitting nervously in a worn-out armchair. On the walls, framed newspaper clippings displayed court victories against large corporations. Construction company convicted of negligence in collapse. Chemical company pays record compensation for river contamination. Miss Clark, Daniel Harris. The man in front of her was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 30s. He wore a simple suit, without a tie, and had attentive eyes that conveyed a mix of kindness and determination. In the modest office, Hannah hesitated before speaking. Daniel waited patiently, offering her water. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, she began, about financial irregularities. Yes, we are investigating several institutions. How can I help you? Hannah took a deep breath. I worked at Meridian Trust until 3 weeks ago. I was fired after finding this. She pulled the memo out of her bag and placed it on the table. Daniel examined the document for long minutes, occasionally making notes. His demeanor, initially neutral, gradually hardened. Miss Clark, do you have any idea what you found? I know they are siphoning money from the pension funds. I know it's wrong. Daniel shook his head slowly. It's more than wrong. It's criminal. This document shows systemic fraud. They are diverting billions of dollars from retirement funds into high-risk operations to increase the executives' bonuses. Hannah felt her heart tighten. What can we do? The question is, what are you willing to do? Reporting something like this isn't easy. You would be up against one of the most powerful institutions in the country. I lost my job. I'm almost out of money. I can barely pay the rent, Hannah confessed. But every time I think about the people who will be hurt, my mother worked all her life as a nurse, trusting this fund for her retirement. Daniel observed the young woman in front of him. He didn't just see a fired secretary, but someone with moral courage, a rare quality in the world where he had worked. Hannah, I can't promise it will be easy, but I promise I'll be by your side every step of the way. And if what this document shows is proven, we may not only stop the fraud but also ensure that you are protected as a whistleblower. That night, alone in her apartment, Hannah faced the biggest dilemma of her life. Daniel had explained the risks. The bank would deny everything, try to discredit her, and might even sue her for breach of confidentiality. But he also explained the legal protections for whistleblowers and how the memorandum could be just the beginning of a much larger investigation. Sitting on the kitchen floor, she opened another letter from her grandmother. Dear Hannah, fear is an inevitable companion on important journeys. Don't fight it. Recognize it, accept it, and then take a step forward anyway. This is how we discover what we're really made of. With tears in her eyes, Hannah knelt and, for the first time in years, prayed. She didn't ask for money or revenge. She asked for clarity, courage, and the assurance of doing the right thing. The next morning, Hannah called Daniel. I'm ready, she said simply. The following days were intense. Daniel introduced Hannah to a team of financial investigators and former banking industry employees. Together, they unraveled the entire scheme. Meridian had created a complex web of transfers to divert pension funds into risky investments in emerging markets. When these investments were successful, the profits were distributed as bonuses to the executives. When they failed, the losses were disguised with accounting manipulations that only delayed the inevitable collapse. With enough evidence, Daniel filed a formal complaint with regulatory agencies and the public prosecutor's office. Hannah was interviewed for hours, going over every detail she remembered from her time at the bank. Meridian's response was swift and aggressive. Through their lawyers, they denied all the accusations and insinuated that Hannah was a disgruntled employee with a history of emotional instability, a complete lie, but devastating nonetheless. Weeks went by without any news. Hannah got a temporary job as a receptionist while the case seemed to languish in bureaucratic labyrinths. Doubt began to eat away at her determination. What if she was wrong? What if she had ruined her career for nothing? One rainy afternoon, Daniel urgently called her to the office. On his face was an expression she couldn't decipher. What happened? Hannah asked apprehensively. Daniel turned his monitor to let her see. It was an email from an anonymous employee at Meridian, with dozens of documents attached. After your complaint started circulating internally, other employees decided to speak out. This is an audit manager. He has everything: transfers, execution orders, even emails from directors discussing how to hide the operations. Hannah covered her mouth with her hands, stunned. You're not alone, Hannah. You never were. The next morning, the news exploded. Dismissed employee exposes billion-dollar retirement fund fraud. Hannah's face was on the front pages alongside headlines detailing the scheme. Meridian's stock plummeted. Regulatory agencies announced comprehensive investigations. Several executives were temporarily removed from their positions. Hannah received dozens of interview requests, which she politely declined. She didn't want the spotlight, only justice. Job offers also started pouring in. Some genuine, others clearly trying to exploit her sudden notoriety. 3 months after the complaint, Hannah received an unexpected call. It was her mother, crying. I just got a letter from the pension fund. They are returning all the money that was diverted, with interest. Hannah, it's almost $200,000. I can finally retire. Hannah cried silently on the phone, feeling a tremendous weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't just her mother. It was thousands of public servants who now had their futures secured. In the ensuing legal process, Meridian Trust was ordered to pay $1 billion fine and compensate all the affected parties. As the official whistleblower, Hannah was awarded a percentage of the fine, enough money to secure her financial stability and pay for the education she had always dreamed of completing. But the most surprising was Daniel Harris's invitation. "Hannah, we're expanding the office. We need someone with your eye for detail and your sense of justice. Not as a secretary, but as a financial investigator. Would you join us?" 1 year later, the small Harrison Associates office had transformed into a respected firm specializing in corporate whistleblowing, with Hannah leading a financial analysis department. Her job now was to teach others how to recognize signs of fraud and protect whistleblowers as she once was. In her new office, on her desk, Hannah kept framed one of her grandmother's letters, which now seemed almost prophetic. "Always remember, my dear Hannah, the details that others ignore often contain the most important truths. Trust your eyes, your heart, and, above all, your courage to do what's right, even when no one else does. That's how a single person can change the world." And that's exactly what she did.